First round pass catchers, Bowers, Thomas, Mitchell, right now on FFT and 5.
All right, Dave. This group of pass catchers, we've already discussed the big three, but there's a lot of exciting prospects outside of the big three who we discuss. So I want to start with Brock Bowers, who I believe is one of the most exciting prospects I've ever covered. And he competes with Kyle Pitts for that. But to
Wow.
me, he might be a little bit better. So I want to hear what you think about Bowers after watching the tape.
Well, he's obviously a big, strong dude. And one of the things that stood out to me that maybe goes under the radar with Bowers fans is that he lined up everywhere. He's more than just the inline tight end. He lined up in the slot. He lined up wide. He lined up as option quarterback at Georgia. And he actually had experience doing that in high school. So it wouldn't be a shock to see him line up as a quarterback in the NFL maybe once or twice per season. But he moves really well. He's got 4.5 speed. I would say it didn't flash as much last year because he dealt with an ankle injury.
Right.
He does a great job adjusting to off-target throws really well. His hands are great. He doesn't go down easy because he's such a big dude. And occasionally he's even used as a rusher near the goal line. That's an interesting thing. You could get a couple of rushing touchdowns out of him year after year. Tell me what you think of this, Dan.
Okay.
He was primarily a short area target for Georgia. About 57% of his career receptions were on passes of 5 air yards or shorter. About 23% of his total receptions, this, overlaps what we just talked about. They were on screen throws. So it's a little scary, but earlier in his career at Georgia, he made some big catches downfield. Did that last year too, just not as many as we had hoped for. And so I'm a little bit worried about him, paired with the fact that he didn't win a lot of 50-50 balls. He does have a moderate list of minor injuries going back to when he was a kid. Maybe he's not just an absolute dominator at 10 plus yards downfield, but it certainly looked like Georgia wanted the ball in his hands and then they would ask him to make a play. And very often he did.
Yeah, I think when it comes to Bowers, what I see from a comp standpoint is if you loved, and I did, Dalton Kincaid in last year's draft class, it's hard for me not to believe you can love Brock Bowers. To me, he's a better version of everything Dalton Kincaid brings. And I've seen the comps to Aaron Hernandez, and I kind of once you see it, you kind of you have to go back to the 2022 tape, I think, Dave, because I think a big factor here is that he was playing hurt last year, and he was not the same player he was to me on tape. But when you watch him take those end arounds that you discussed, and like quarterback draws, you think about like how the Chiefs use Kelsey in the red zone. And I just think if he goes to the right coordinator, he could be he could be scoring 10 touchdowns a year for fantasy football. So I'm a big fan of his.
I'm real curious which team takes the shot on him because I almost feel like he's a luxury pick in the draft. But
Yeah.
wherever he goes, should end up being at worst number 2 on the team of targets. If he ends up somehow with the Chargers, he could be their top target getter for a long time. That would be awesome for fantasy football. Let's move along to Adonai Mitchell from Texas. I know that you studied him. What do you think of him, Dan?
Yeah, AD Mitchell is a polarizing prospect in this class. I've seen him ranked all the way from wide receiver 12 to wide receiver 4. For me, he's my wide receiver 4 in this draft class, and I'm taking a leap there. And it's a leap of faith because it's a projection-based ranking. And the statistical profile would make him an outlier if he hits the NFL level. But when you watch the tape, it's clear to see what he has. He has incredible length, size, and footwork. His release package off the line of scrimmage is immediately going to make him one of the best red zone weapons in this entire draft class. And that includes the big 3 wide receivers there. I think he's up there with them from that standpoint. And then what separates him from me versus a guy like Brian Thomas, who I think they are somewhat similar prospects, long, sub 4.4 speed. They have the height, they have the leaping ability, they have the ability to adjust in the red zone. What separates him from me versus Brian Thomas is his ability to get in and out of his breaks on the in-breaking routes. He was used in the middle of the field more than Brian Thomas, and he showed the traits available. And that's where you win at the NFL level. I think the thing with AD Mitchell is you're going to see reps when you watch him, Dave, of him taking off plays. It happens. If the play doesn't come to his side, it looks weird on tape. You'll just see him kind of lollygagging. But if he gets with the right coach who can unlock what his potential is, he has more upside to me than the rest of these guys who are ranked ahead of him by consensus. So I just swing for upside. I swing for elite talent when it comes to fantasy football. I know this guy can be a 10 touchdown threat with the ability to hit deep balls if he hits his ceiling. So I'm going for the ceiling here.
We didn't even mention just the speed is good. I mean, you mentioned how fast he is, and he's as fast as Brian Thomas, maybe a smidge slower than Brian Thomas, but he's really good at tracking the ball down the field.
Yes.
Does his route running pass the test for you? Is his technique ready to go for the NFL?
So I love his release package off the line of scrimmage, and
Right.
I think it has a lot to do with his footwork. As far as his route running, I think it still needs to be refined in a lot of ways. But how he can win right now, right off the line of scrimmage, and then in the red zone, it just makes him a possible immediate fantasy hit in the sense that if he gets you 8 to 10 touchdowns, you're not really going to care if he's getting you 10, 20 receptions game. And he did show he has the ability against Kansas this past year. He had 10 receptions for 141 and a touchdown. And that was the one game he was used as the focal point.
Does it bother you that he doesn't have a lot of yards after contact?
I do not think that's going to be his calling card. He is not a post-catch receiver, in my opinion. Yards after contact, yards after the catch. He doesn't have a lot of elusiveness in the open field.
Does it bother you that he played in 3 different high schools in 2 different states and then played in 2 different colleges?
Not necessarily, because I've read that he transferred from Georgia to Texas to get closer to his newborn son, or I think it was his son or daughter. I'm not sure, his child. So I think that
Took a
that was
50-50 shot on
there.
that.
Yeah.
Okay, so Adonai Mitchell, I agree with you. He's my number 4 guy as well. It is
Okay.
based on projection. I think he does have a shot to be good. I compared him to Nico Collins. I think that he could
Love that
be
comp.
that same type of big receiver who can just move really well. You talked about his break release back, his breaks and his release packages. I think he could get there with his breaks as well to be what Nico Collins has been. And that means that we both have him ranked, unless you're moving Odunze down.
No.
We both have him ranked ahead of Brian Thomas. And to me, Brian Thomas is that prototypical tall, fast, lean guy. And he's got the long arms, huge catch radius. I thought he did a good job running routes at lower speeds and he was willing to cross the middle of the field, but he did not have a full route tree. He ran a ton of routes that were either goes or hitches. I
Right.
believe half of his routes last year were those 2 routes specifically. And so I'm worried about that. I'm worried about how lean he is. He doesn't have a big build to him. And I know that he was held out of football at one point in his life because his dad called him, quote, frail. That makes me a little bit nervous. I thought his route running could still use some work. He rounded his cuts. He tipped off his routes at times. Didn't seem sudden as far as short area agility goes, which is weird because you would think that someone who's as fast as he is could be sudden and make quick moves
Right.
and make guys miss. Didn't happen nearly as much. And he wasn't dominant on 50-50 balls. So there's a projection that needs to be made here. I just think back to all kinds of receivers from Jameson Williams to DJ Chark to, insert your own name here of tall, lean, fast receivers. Sometimes they work out and they're outstanding. Sometimes they come into the league and they don't do so well. Are we close on Brian Thomas or do you see him a little differently?
We're in the exact same page on Brian Thomas. I've struggled with Thomas's entire draft process. He's not wide receiver 4 for me, and I don't know how close he even is to 4 because I think in an old school NFL, Dave, he could be a hit immediately and he could be a fantasy hit. But in today's NFL, with so many teams going to the Vic Fangio principles and the cover 3, having 2 or 3 high safeties, I just don't. Right now, what you said is really what stands out to me. His route tree it doesn't really fit today's NFL right now. He could still get better at all those things. He can become an intermediate.
Yes.
He can
Everybody
become a quick winner. He has those traits too that project to potentially do that. But I see it more already on Mitchell's tape than a player like Thomas. So right now I'm wondering, does he for fantasy, is he just a guy who occasionally hits that big touchdown for you, but you never know when to start him and he's better for best ball?
The one last thing I'll say, and it's a strike against Thomas, is I saw a lot of basket catches.
Yep.
A lot of body catches. And it reminded me a little bit of what I saw from Jameson Williams at times. Williams would catch balls on his hip. And I thought to myself when I was evaluating him, oh, you know what? He'll work on that. He'll be a much better receiver. Not to say that Jameson Williams never caught the ball away from his frame or that Thomas never does either, but you want to see more of that. Mitchell does more of that.
Yes.
And I that kind of stuck with me when I saw that from Brian Thomas. I thought to myself, all right, that could lead to balls getting knocked out after he makes the catch. It could lead to, eventual fumbles.
Yep.
It makes me a little bit nervous. I feel like there's a little bit more to fix with Thomas than there is with Mitchell. Both of them not perfect prospects. Both of them won't get drafted before Brock Bowers. Bowers is going to go ahead of both of them.
Yes.
But all 3 of them do have a chance to be big-time fantasy contributors if they get in the right spot, if they've got good coaching. We will talk about those spots. We will talk about those opportunities. The week of the draft is almost here.
So excited.
I can't wait to talk about it with you guys. For Dan Schneier, I'm Dave Richard. We'll talk to you tomorrow on FFT in 5.